everyone, it's Catherine here from Ink Finger Cat. So I've just finished doing a video where I've tidied up and I've just done a craft room tour, so that'll already be on my channel. And I said at the end of that, I'm gonna go do some crafting, and then I was like, maybe I won't, maybe I will, don't know. It's really warm. It's the warmest day of the year so far. I don't actually know what temp. I'm looking for my phone, and of course you're my phone. Yeah, I don't actually know what temperature it is, but they were threatening 30 degrees. I don't think it's 30 degrees yet. I think it's probably about 27 though. It feels warm in this room. I am currently joined by a cat. Yep, that's next door's cat Simba, who has chosen to come and sleep at our house. He keeps going and getting in the sunshine, which is really random because he must be boiling. But yeah, I'm currently joined by a cat. So that's not normal. Bless him, next door's cat has just completely adopted us. Anyway, I said I wasn't sure if I'd do crafting or not because it's so warm. But I think I will. And I'm just thinking I'm going to make a background, maybe into a masterboard. Maybe make a card at the end of that. Do you want to watch? Okay. So I'm going to put the camera into the clamp over the desk, and then you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I've just got a piece of A4 card. It's not particularly thick. You know what? I've changed my mind already. I'm going to use craft cardstock instead. And I'm going to go and grab some paints. Okay, so I've just grabbed some paper artsy paints in some really nice bright colours. I'm just going to play. How about that? So, how is everyone? I don't think I actually did much chatting to camera when I was doing that video. I was mainly doing tidy up, and then I did a nice little craft room tour. So I don't think I really talked much, but well, that's a translucent one, so we want an opaque one. So I don't know if anybody knows, so I might as well just tell you. Paper artsy fresco finished chalk acrylics. I love these paints. I've used them for years, but they have this little thing on the front which is a little swatch, and it tells you whether it's an opaque, a translucent, or a semi-translucent. Oh, semi-opaque it says. There you go, there's one. Semi-opaque. So you can see there how see-through they are with like one little coat of paint. So you have your opaque, which is your most opaque, least see-through, all the way through to translucent, which clearly is very see-through. So if you're doing your base, you tend to be wanting to put in opaques down, unless you've got, like if I was doing it on white, it wouldn't matter so much because obviously the translucent over a white will just be tinting the white. But on something like a craft cardstock, or if you've got a wood or something like that, you're probably going to want to go with your opaques as your bottom colour. So that's just a little bit of knowledge on how to use them. Now I've had these for a while. Some of them are actually quite dried up because I've just not been crafting as much as I used to, and I'm just not using things as much. So some of them have sat here not being used for quite some time. There are different ways of applying them. Clearly you can use a paintbrush, you can use sponges, you can use a baby wipe or something similar, you can use your fingers. So I'm just going to start with a baby wipe because what I want to do is just get a bit of a base colour going down. I haven't got a plan about what I'm doing. I'm literally just applying colour. Now, because the baby wipe is moist, I mean, it's not the wettest baby wipe in the world, but there is some water in there. Clearly it's watering down the base colour a little bit, which means it's not as opaque as it was. So that's something to be bearing in mind. But what you tend to find, because these are chalk acrylics, is obviously they have that sort of chalky finish. I mean, already I'm loving this. It probably looks right old mess on the screen, but I'm loving it. So that was butternut colour. And I am just choosing these colours pretty much at random at this point. Because I know that they'll go together, and if they don't, I'll find a way of making them work together. They'll all be fine. And they'll sort of blend a little bit and they'll work with each other. Now, a translucent obviously will blend more because you're going to see a little bit of that base colour coming through, whereas the opaque, you're not going to see as much of the base colour because it's going to be literally covering up what was underneath. And I'm just after trying to get a bit of colour all over that craft background. I might go back to the butternut in a minute. Yeah, I think I probably will. Just try and get a bit of colour all over this. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, but I'm going to come up with something, I am sure. And we're going to love it. But you see there, the opaque, if you put it on and you put it on in quite a thick layer, you can't see that pink that's coming through underneath. What was it? Prawn colour. You can't see it same. Whereas if you start to sort of add a water-based type thing to it, it will start to water it out and you will start to see some of the other colours coming through. And I'm literally just, there's no real rhyme or reason as to where I'm going with this colour. This is literally just my background, which I'm actually in love with, which is always a danger when you fall in love with your background. Learn not to fall in love with your background because you're going to start putting more and more stuff on it. So next step is to get a stencil. So I'm going to my stencil box and I'm going to have a look what we've got in here that we've maybe not used for a little while. Well, they look fun. Now, baby wipe is not an ideal thing to use when you're using a stencil. You're better with a sponge or something, but I am just going to use this because this one, I'm not so bothered about the final outcome of it. It's just about starting to get some pattern down. You see, you're not really getting very much. You're getting a few of those squares coming through, but not much else. So it'll add something, but it's not going to add anything major. Which is fine. Doesn't need to. Okay. Pop that to one side. Now, this one, I think we're going to go that way with it. So, I don't know about other people, but when I'm crafting, I really like to have things going in horizontal and vertical lines. I don't like things to be particularly squiffy. What do I mean by squiffy? I suppose what I mean, sorry, I'm just looking. So now I'm starting to be a bit more choosy about my colours. I really don't need to. But yeah, I don't like it to be like off like that. I want it to be straight on. You don't have to. It's just the way I like it. So this is a translucent one. So this one, you're going to see it has a different consistency to it for a start. But you might get to see it doesn't cover up what's underneath. It just changes the colour tone, or it changes the colour property as opposed to a different colour. There we go. But you can still sort of see the variations underneath it of the other colours that were there. I think that's what I really like about the fact that these paints offer you different varieties, but they tell you what they are. I think you don't often get that in a paint. They tend to just tell you a colour, or they all tend to be opaque, or they all tend to be translucent, and they don't tend to tell you, oh, this is going to do this. So it gives you a clue as to what it's going to do when you start applying it to your project. That's, I think, what I like, is it just helps those of us who aren't as clued up, or maybe don't use the products very frequently, to remember this is what this is going to do when I use this product. I love that about it. Anyway, yes, I don't like things squiffy, so I do tend to go inlines. I'm not saying I want it to be perfect, and I'm not saying I want it to be all lined up. I just want my eye to be drawn in a line or a line. I don't want it to be like higgledy-piggledy, so that I feel like I've gone topsy-turvy in some way. And I get a little bit particular about writing as well. Writing has to be the right way up or exactly on its side. It's just, again, we all have our ways, don't we? I'm going to come back to this stencil and just use this. And you see here the main lines are going across the page. So this time I'm going across with it. And when I'm stenciling, I'm absolutely not looking for a perfect image. I am just starting to add pattern and shape to what I'm doing. This is still a background. This is not my focal finished piece, is it? It's just something that's going to sit in the background, and I want it to have fun, and I want it to have a bit of maybe texture and something a bit different, but I don't want it to take over the whole whatever the thing is that I've put on as a focal feature. And quite often with these, I tend to make quite simple cards in the end, if I'm going to turn it into a card, which I probably will, because simple, like a simple white die cut over this would look lovely. I can already tell that that's going to look fabulous, because it doesn't need anything else. Okay, I think I'm happy with those two stencils. Now I have got, I think, a bit of a need for something contrasty. So these are all very warm colours. I'm thinking maybe stick a bit of double denim in, and it might look rubbish. We shall see. And you'll see I do not bother to change my sponge or anything. I am literally just going to use the same sponge. I tend to dab quite a lot before I start applying it. Double denim is an opaque, but it's not, it's quite watery opaque for some reason. This one doesn't react quite as well as it should do. It might be to do with the age of the actual paint rather than anything else. No, really liking that. There's a bit of contrast to what we've been doing. Yeah, nice. Yeah, it might be to do with the age of the paint. They are all quite old, so this one might have separated more. Maybe I didn't shake it particularly well, so the pigment stuff is all towards the bottom rather than the top of the jar. Maybe that's why that looks a little bit more opaque. Still a bit gel-like. We'll see. I'm sure it'll all be fine. I'm liking that. Also thinking this is the point in which to go a little bit crazy. Maybe add some splatters. So this is just a wet, very old, very mistreated fan brush. Just gently adding them onto my projects on splatters. Need to let that dry, and I also probably need to just clean up a bit of the mess. Not so bothered about the stuff that's dry, I just didn't particularly want the very wet stuff. Right, I think I'm going to pause. I'm going to use my heat tool to dry this because those splatters are wet and I don't particularly want the next stage to be impacting on them. So I'll turn you off whilst I dry this. Okay, so that's all dry. I thinking we need a bit of stamping now, just some background stamps of some description. So I'm gonna just, where are my background stamps? Where have I put them? Have I got rid of them? Have I forgotten where they are? That last part is definitely true. Okay, so found some. Not the ones I was looking for. I possibly have got rid of the ones I was looking for. They were looking quite worn. And dried out as stamps, so they don't stamp brilliantly, which doesn't really matter for mixed media work, but clearly at some point I decided enough was enough. So I am just going to use this leftover bit of paint that is on the mat to add a little bit of stamping. It doesn't come through particularly clearly. In fact, blind man galloping horse would not be able to see that. No one would be able to see that. Probably doesn't help that I've used the same colour as the backgrounds, but you know what? Persist and try and try again. Oh, that one came through a bit better. It was probably just the paint was a bit too dry. That will give me a bit. There we go. Right, that'll do for that one. And I think we will also, sorry, I do clean stamps when I've used paint quite quickly. And I must admit, I do always use a baby wipe rather than anything else, which is not environmentally brilliant, but I just find it's the quickest and easiest way to make sure I've got that stamp clean. If you leave paint on stamps, it doesn't do them much good, because it becomes really solid and then it becomes part of the stamp, really. So not ideal to keep paint on your stamps is my general advice. Right, so stamping with that wasn't working particularly well. Do we want to start going in with something quite bold like black, or do we want to perhaps put a different colour? Let's try with Rick Raspberry ink. Let's go with the French text. Like that. It's cute. It's adding something. It's not adding anything distinct, which is important. But it's adding something. And then we will use maybe the Starry Sky ink. Which is a lovely sort of very purpley brown, purpley blue for our, what I'm assuming is Japanese, but I have no idea really what it is. There we go. Again, this is just about background stuff. This is not about a finished product or anything along those lines. This is just about adding to the background. I've probably gone in a little bit harsh on that. That one in particular, the others aren't too bad, but that one's probably a little bit hard. So you might need to just soften that a little bit, and maybe now we need to add in some white. So I don't think I've got any white paint. No. but I have got white gesso. Okay, so I have got some gesso, and I think probably need some bigger circles. I'm almost thinking like that size circles. So I am going to just use my sponge, pick a little bit of that gesso up. Do you know what? Okay, that does not stamp well, but that might be because I did not put enough of the gesso on it. There we go. I do think we probably need a cleaner image than this, but I'll just work with that for the moment. And the gesso white is just slightly tainting because of the colour that's in the background of this sponge. A bit more the gesso. That'll probably do for that. Yeah, I'm going to just clean that lid because I'd like it to fit on my tub and not make a mess of it. And again, I'm going to go in and get some splatters in the white. This is probably where, when I stand up, I'll find out I've got loads of white paint all over my top. It'll always wash. Right, again, I'm going to go and dry this with the heat tool. I'm wanting a bit more of a solid something or other. Just trying to think what to use. I want a simple shape. Maybe I need to use a stencil. Thinking maybe this. Yeah, right, dry first. Whoops. Okay, so I've given that a dry, and I'm just thinking, do I want okay, so that's something to be mindful of. When it's a little bit liquidy, which I'd forgotten it was, it's going to go through your stencil, isn't it? So best to try not to use too liquidy a stencil. Liquidy a paint. You know what? If you do, you do. It's fine. We'll find a way. Sorting this out. It'll all be fine, and it's not very white anymore as a result of the colours coming through underneath and the sponge not being clean. That'll do fine. Again, this is still, it's a background. Doesn't need to be perfect. Just a background. Okay, I think we might have finished with the gesso bits there. I think it might be time to maybe add a little bit more paint. I don't know. What do we reckon? I think maybe a little bit of paint transfer. So I had some scraps of paper and cardstock over on my desk, so I'm going to use this one. And we're going to do a bit of this paint. And we're literally just going to smear it on like that. And be not particularly concerned. Oh, well, there you go. That's got gesso and all sorts in it now. That's all we're going to do is just go like that. paint that you've got no control over where it's going, because you are literally just popping it down quite randomly over your page, and you've got no control as to how much is going to stick, how much isn't. I think that's probably going to do for our first background. I think we'll move on to maybe a bit of pen work, but I do need that to dry first, so I'm going to pop it on pause. Probably go and get myself a drink because I'm absolutely dying of thirst, and then hopefully it'll be dry when I come back. Okay, so I've had a good long drink, I've had a little tidy up, and I've just been and grabbed a couple of other stamps. So one of the things that I want to just point out is I use Stampin' Up inks on the paint. Stampin' Up inks are a dye-based ink, so they are not permanent. So if I put any kind of water substance on, then they're going to move. There's a little bit of, they do dye, they do sort of leave most of the imprint there, but they don't always. So it's just something to be really mindful of. Ideally you do something like archival inks, but I only have black, brown and grey, and I didn't particularly want at that point to put on black, brown or grey. I'm actually now thinking I am going to add some brown on. So I'm probably going to use my brown sepia archival, but also my archival inks are really quite dry. So it's not the ideal thing to do when you're painting, using paints and doing a mixed media, is to use dye-based inks, but sometimes you use what you've got. And I'm not one that's going to be making something that's going to last forever. I do understand that it's not going to necessarily last forever. So sometimes it's fine that, you know, it might move or it might change with time. It's generally going to be a background on a card that I'm using it for. So just something to be mindful of, depending on what you're doing, that you need to think about these sorts of things. Anyway, I grabbed some paper artsy stamps. I bought these a little while ago from somebody secondhand, from Chris Cresswell, who I love. The lovely Chris Cresswell. Done lots of art journals with her. And we had a lovely time at like a little crafting retreat meetup thing, and anyway, she did a sale because she's got a lot of stash and she needed to sell some, so I had to buy a few things, and I have never used them. And they're sort of clock based numbers. Do they go with this? Not necessarily, but they'll do. And the other thing I've picked up is these paper artsy stamps, which are days of the week and some numbers and date things. I don't need these to be specific for something, so I am literally just going to grab a few numbers and stamp them on, and I am going to then grab some of those days and things, words, and stamp those on. That's what I'm going to do. Again, they're probably not going to come out perfectly because this ink is a little bit dry, but I don't mind that. That's absolutely fine. What comes out is what comes out. To be honest, they're just there for, again, adding some pattern and interest into a background, something that's a bit different. Will anybody see these numbers when the final card's made? Possibly not, but I know that they're there. I know I did. So why did I pick 7? 7 is one of my lucky numbers because I'm born in July, so 7th month. And the other numbers I like are 14. So we're going to do a 1 and a 4. For 14. Because I was born on the 14th of the month. My daughter was born on the 14th of the month. My mum and dad were married on the 14th of the month. I was married on the 14th of the month. So funnily enough, 14 is a lucky number for us. we go. So that's those ones. Don't need to worry about particularly cleaning them because archival just stays there anyway. So let's go for the word now. Ooh, I got interrupted. I switched the camera off and then forgot to switch it back on. I've not got any further. I'm still stamping nows. And how about the word later? That sounds fun. Right, I think that will do with those and the brown, because I think we might have gone slightly overly brown again now. So I think we're on to pen work. So pens, I tend to use a mix really of Posca pens, and I have a couple of different Posca pens in different colours. Also the black. I also have things like the Pick pens, or even Pro markers would work. I don't know how well they go on. There we go, they'll do. There's a selection of pens to play with. And again, do I want to do this before I've cut it up or after I've cut it up? Well, let's do some now. So when you're using the Pick pens, like these big brush pens and stuff, they are permanent once they're dry, but whilst they're wet you can do a little bit of movement. So there you can see you can start to change things and give them shadows and depth and define items. So I think we'll just do that with some of these circles. Obviously it is turning that white gesso orange because I'm smearing it over the white and it's going to stain it. It's also turning my finger orange, but we can cope with that. I am Inky Finger Cat. But you can see there how I've gone over the that starry sky. It sort of turned it a bit muddy. So be warned if you use the wrong kind of ink with your stamping. Well, it's not the wrong kind of ink. It's just a kind of ink that isn't permanent. So just be warned. You just need to think sometimes about that, or maybe just add that stamping later on or whatever. But I wanted it as part of the background, so that's what we've got. So that's the Pick pens. Let's add a bit of blue Pick pen. I don't think we've got anything blue as such, so let's see what happens when we add that to here. Just gives it something different, doesn't it? So you can leave it clearly as just something that's a solid line or something along those, but I really like it when you do and you sort of wipe at it and it sort of stains the background and softens the actual image of what we're looking at. So it's not such a stark line, but it sort of turns it into the background. I'll just do around the outsides of that. bit of shading. Which helps bring that 4 forward. We'll do the same with the 1 since we've done the 7 as well. Just helps to give it a bit of definition. Change the colour, we'll go for something a bit more neutral for these ones. Do the same thing. It's not really going to add as much. It's just going to move that ink that's in that background around. It's at this point that I remember that I'm videoing and think, oh yeah, I'm going to talk, aren't I? Okay. I can always come back to any of these sorts of pens at any other point. I think we will start to add in a bit of maybe the black pen. So this is the first time we're adding any black to this. We may well decide that we didn't want to add the black to it and we've done some, but too late, it's going. This is what will happen. It's really important when you're doing this kind of pen work that you make sure that you that it's all dry, or your paint is dry, because otherwise it's going to completely eat your pen nib. I'm not entirely sure that these are quality pen nibs to start with at this point, because to be honest, I've had them quite a while. But yeah, it is really important. If you've got a pen that you really like, don't use it when you're doing mixed media. It's not wise to do that. Okay, I zoned out, completely and utterly zoned out, forgot I was doing a video. Really enjoying myself, just doing mark making. I mean, does it look a big old mess? Yeah. Does it look great? Yeah. I'm having fun? Yeah. So yeah, this is what happens sometimes, and this is the joy of crafting and creating. It's just literally do what you fancy, have some fun, and I just keep swapping out the pen, choosing a different pen, and this sort of mark making that I'm doing now, as in just literally going round bits of shapes that I can see and patterns, and sort of loosely bringing them out, but not being concerned about necessarily following the exact shapes or whatever. Adding circles, adding little lines, this kind of stuff. This I learned when I did the Seth Apter course. So Seth Apter, really talented mixed media kind of artist who is American. I want to say he's from New York. He certainly lives in New York, but I don't know whether he's from New York. I'm rubbish at those sorts of accents and knowing which ones are which. But yeah, he came over and did a paper. He designed some stuff for paper artsy, but he came over and did a paper artsy like day. And we went down. Me and some friends went down for the course, and it was just fabulous. It's one of the best art type days that I've ever had, to be perfectly honest. I really enjoyed it. And we did a big canvas, which is sort of sitting on my desk. It's actually partially covered up, so I do need to at some point find out a way of doing something with it. But yeah, it's just basically just keep going. As he says, there's never enough layers. If you think you've done enough layers, do another 3 layers. I think it was something like you're only ever 1 layer away from genius, but also you're only ever 1 layer away from looking awful. So just keep going. You never know what you'll find. And sometimes I don't want to do that. Sometimes I just want easy crafting and I just want to do something simple, get it done. But today feels very much like the kind of day where you go, do you know what? I am just gonna keep going, keep having fun on this, and see what we come up with at the very end. And it might start to look really messy. But you know what? I don't care. I'm having fun, and if this doesn't turn into anything, it doesn't turn into anything. The important thing is always am I having fun doing this? And at this point, yes, I'm having fun. But I was just conscious that I hadn't spoken, so probably you got a little bit of that into fast forward whilst I was merrily making marks, not making a single sound. Just literally crafting away without a single thought as to what was going on. And I think that this is I've been doing a lot of listening to Fern Cotton's, is it Fern Cotton? Yeah, I'm sure that's the name. Happy Place podcast recently whilst I've been doing my walking, and that's what I've been listening to. They're quite old, the ones I've been listening to, because they're all sort of pre-COVID, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens when we get into COVID as to how she manages to carry on, and whether the subject matter start to sort of morph into how we've all coped with, or not coped with, lockdown and stuff. That'll be quite an interesting transition, I am sure. But yeah, but there's definitely been quite a few about like mindfulness and that's the wrong way. Type things. Yeah, mindfulness. And this is absolutely for me. I am concentrating on one thing. Everything else just disappears from my head. And that, I think, is the power of crafting, because it allows me to just zero out and not have to think about anything at all. So I think I'll probably, again, stick you into fast forward, because you really don't want to just listen to my breathing, which is probably very snotty with the hay fever, whilst I absolutely don't concentrate on what I'm doing in terms of a video and just literally zone out and get this sort of to a point where I'm happy to cut it up and start making something out of it. So I'll see you when I've stopped having this much fun. So there is my finished masterboard. It's a bit busy, isn't it? It's a bit crazy busy. So now, cut it up, use it for cards. That's the plan. Again, don't actually have an actual plan, as in, don't entirely know what I'm going to do with it. I really like it, don't get me wrong. But I think first things first,